Hello, and welcome back to our study on Luke. Today we're going to be investigating chapter 1, verse 5. My name is Barbara Eccleston. I'm glad that you're here. Let's begin by reading what this verse says. Okay? Luke 1, verse 5. In the days of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zacharias of the division of Abijah, and he had a wife from the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. Doesn't seem like there's much there to discuss. There's a lot behind the scenes that I think we should be discussing here. And so I'm actually going to make this one verse is going to be 2 videos. This first one, I just want to discuss this short little piece here that says that Herod is king of Judea. What's going on? Who's Herod? To begin with, this phrase, Herod, king of Judea, it's probably pretty innocent sounding, but I'm quite certain that this would run shivers down the spines of many of the Jews. So who was Herod, and why does he matter? Why would I take an entire video to discuss him? Well, if we hope to understand the full impact of this message, we first have to understand about some basic history of when Herod was ruling. So the scriptures that would have been available at this time to the people in Israel is only the Old Testament. None of the New Testament existed yet. And so that's roughly the first half of our modern Bibles. The Old Testament was written over a period of about 1,000 years, and it ends with the book of Malachi. And then there's about 400 years of silence before the New Testament begins its story. Those 400 years are called the silent years because God was no longer speaking to his people. He wasn't sending prophets to give them any messages. God was no longer using the prophets to call the people to repentance. Up until this time, they had had several warnings from God through various prophets, but now he stopped. The people had failed to repent, and he just left them to their own devices to just kind of wallow in their sins, if you will. And that is just what they did. They fell into many sins, and their leaders at that time just became more and more corrupt as these 400 years went on. So for comparison's sake, let's look at something here in the United States. Back in 1890, in that time frame, 130 years ago, it would have been mandatory that our public schools taught the Bible. It was felt that to leave out the Bible from teaching our children, that it would have led to the moral breakdown of society. We can see what has happened over the last 130 years, but now stretch that out and imagine that it's been 400 years since that happened, and what kind of society we'd be living in without the grounding of the Bible in our society. So here we are. We're in Luke chapter 1, and it's now been 400 years since Malachi, the prophet, spoke to the nation of Israel. And we find Herod is the ruler over Judea, someone we've probably all heard of. But you might not be aware that there are several individuals in the Bible with the same name. You can think of Herod as being a last name or a surname. He was kind of the Herodians, as it's called. This is like a political dynasty that we would say the Kennedys or the Roosevelts, right, here in the United States. So the Herodians, the Herod and his descendants, who are also named Herod, there were, as far as I know, all the Herods that are mentioned in the Bible, they're all related. I'm fairly certain of that. And there's at least 4 different generations represented in the Bible. So the Herod found here in verse 5, he is known as Herod the Great. He is the one that's responsible for killing all the babies after the visit of the wise men, and that they didn't return to him with the news of where to find Jesus, the baby. That can be found in Matthew 2:16. Another Herod killed John the Baptist. That's in Mark 6:18 to 28. And he also put Jesus on trial in Luke 23, 6 to 25. Yet another Herod killed the apostle James and imprisoned Peter. Both of these events are recorded in Acts 12, 1 through 19. At the end of Acts, sorry for the dog. At the end of Acts, we meet one more Herod, also called King Agrippa, who heard Paul's defense after being arrested. That's recorded in Acts 25 and 26. Let me just pause here for a moment, and I want to share with you, gee, Barbara, how do you know all this stuff? Well, I am reading from a piece of paper because I don't have all that put in my mind by any stretch. But these are notes that I made when I was teaching through Luke back in January of 2016. But so back in 2016, how did I figure all this out? How did I know about the 4 different generations of Herods and all their misdeeds? Well, I used something called a Bible dictionary. And I have for you today, I want to just briefly talk with you for a moment about this. This is Zondervan's Illustrated Bible Dictionary. The authors are Douglas and Tenney, Tenney. And I've made a video earlier today where I talk about why it's so important that we all have a Bible dictionary in our homes. This is a wealth of information, and this is just one example where you can read this casually, where it says, in the days of Herod, king of Judea, and you're opening up a whole can of worms if you know to just look for something, right? And so I get this information that I'm sharing with you today in this video, and back in 2016 to do this class, by just opening up this Bible dictionary to the word Herod. And the entry here, it starts on page 600, and it goes on 601, 602, 603, 604, and even part of 605, it's talking about the Herodians in general, right? Herod. Who is Herod? Well, there's 2, 4, almost 6 pages in this Bible dictionary devoted to who is Herod. And I'm just giving you a real short synopsis of that. But to just pass over this quickly and say, well, Herod was the king. Well, that doesn't really inform us in everything that we should know about that statement, okay? So whether you're going to read in detail 6 pages, or 4 pages, whatever it was, from this dictionary, that's up to you. But this is just one example of why it's so important to have a Bible dictionary. And so in the last video where we talked about Luke's prologue, the introduction, verses 1 through 4, I introduced you to Theophilus. And practically the entire video was Theophilus this and Theophilus that and da-da-da-da. And how did I get all that information on Theophilus? Well, I used Tenney's dictionary and found out who he was and all about him. And I just want to encourage you that it's not just good for names, but certainly names, places, events, things like that. But even ideas, like if you wanted to look up, what is baptism or what is sanctification, what's regeneration, all of those ideas, you can look those up in a Bible dictionary and probably have more information than you'd ever want, but it will be very thorough. It'll also give you the verses, the specific verses in the Bible where they got that information. How did they know this is happening? That this is what this means. And so you can kind of cross-reference that and look up those passages in the context and get more information and really become, very informed about what you're reading in the Bible. So I hope that that's a book that interests you. Maybe check out that video that I mentioned that's on a Bible dictionary on how to study the Bible using a Bible dictionary. And I'll put a link to that in the description below of this video. I'm learning how to do that. Yay! Anyways, so back to Herod. This idea that Herod is now the king over Judea, whew, that's very strange. You might not realize just how strange that is. We go all the way back to the book of Genesis, the beginning of our Bibles, and we're told about the family of Abraham. Abraham had 2 sons, Ishmael and Isaac. And Isaac also had 2 sons, Esau and Jacob. And then Jacob's name is changed to Israel. And Israel has 12 sons, who we now know as the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? So Esau is Jacob's brother, and, well, his twin brother. They're not identical twins, though, and Esau has red hair. So his name, Esau, actually means red. And the descendants of Esau became known as Edomites. Again, the Esau means red. So Edomites, people with red, right? And Herod is an Edomite. He's a descendant of Esau. So that means that the king over Israel at the time Jesus is born is not from Israel. He is not one of the descendants of Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, right? But he is a descendant of this twin brother of Jacob's, Esau. He's an Edomite. So I think that that's theologically important to understand. Israel is being ruled by someone who's not of Israel. Okay, and that happens throughout their history. You know, we see that they get taken into captivity and all sorts of things. But their leader, you know, Herod, is very, very corrupt. But beyond that, he's also just not even, you know, he's not a follower of God. But what we do know about Herod as well, from reading our Bible dictionary here, is that he was the one that was responsible for building the massive temple that is in Jerusalem at the time. And it is called Herod's temple. It's not called God's temple. It's Herod's temple. And that's a pretty good distinction right there. This was a serious undertaking for Herod. It lasted over 40 years. And all the while he's doing this, he's trying to build this huge temple. And why? Because he's not a worshiper of God. Well, he's trying to make peace with the people he's ruling over. You see, if he isn't able to control the Israelites, then Rome is going to bring in a new king. And he's going to be out of a job, maybe off with his head. Who knows, right? But so Herod's just looking out for number one. And he thinks that he builds this temple for the Israelites, that they're going to love him. Well, they did not, because he wasn't one of the 12 from the 12 tribes, and they knew that. They all knew that. And they never accepted Herod as their king, though politically speaking, he was, right? So this expensive building, however, and it was very expensive, was really frowned upon by Rome because they didn't quite get the reason why is Herod spending all this money on this building, and they weren't very pleased with it. But Herod, again, looking out for number one, he decides he's going to put the Roman eagle symbol of Rome. He puts an eagle over the main entrance of Herod's temple, and that was to appease Rome and say, you know, look, hey, this temple is dedicated to you, right? So he's trying to make the Jews happy. Well, they weren't happy because he wasn't a Jew. And so nothing he did was ever going to change that. And then he was trying to make Rome happy by putting this Roman eagle over the entryway. But that didn't really make Rome happy either, because the budget for this building was just massive. Anyways, he's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place here. He's trying to please both these people and not doing a very good job with either one. But anyways, he just wanted to have power at any cost. He really did. And we see that in his act, that he's going to kill all the baby boys in this land out of fear that there is a new king of the Jews being born, right? So as Jesus was about to come to earth as a baby, the people of Judea are being ruled by an Edomite, someone not from God's chosen people. And as we look at the list of atrocities that not only he committed, but all of his various family members, we can begin to understand how important it is to have God-fearing, godly leaders, right? We talked about in the last lesson how Theophilus is a sheep in God's eyes, that this is one of God's own children, and that he put it on Luke's heart to mentor Theophilus through this writing of Luke's gospel. And how important this was, that this young Christian, that he be grounded in the faith, so that wherever it was where he was living and working, that he could be safe from the ravenous wolves that would try to deceive him and trick him out of his salvation and understanding of the truth, right? But anyways, we talked about how important it was to pass our faith on to those around us in our circle of influence. But let's look at what is happening here with Herod. He's doing the same thing, but not in a godly way. He has, as his sheep, all of his sons and maybe grandsons that he is influencing. He has a circle of influence in his family, right? He is a man of power and of wealth and influence over the countryside. And Herod's using that for evil. He is promoting killing, senseless murder. And we'll see that in the other things that were, let's just go back to that other page and look at some of those things. So killing all those baby boys was the beginning, I suppose. But killing of John the Baptist, putting Jesus on trial, killing the Apostle James, imprisoning Peter, all of these atrocities, it's kind of just like got funneled down through this one man's leadership, or lack thereof, his poor leadership, right? And so I'm going to challenge you, just think about who you're influencing and how you're influencing them, and really make sure that you are walking in a manner worthy of the calling of Jesus, right? That and that you're having a positive influence on especially the young people that are around you, whether it's your first generation or your grandchildren, great grandchildren, whoever they are. Just influence them for good. I'll end this video with just a quick story of horror. But in 2008, there was I was living in Woodburn at the time, Woodburn, Oregon, and there was a bombing at a bank where a bomb exploded, and people were hurt, people were killed. As the days passed, the investigation was carried out. It was learned that the bomb was built in the home of a man with the assistance of his adult son. And the two of them, as a team, went into this bank and placed the bomb there. Here's this father with a young son. I mean, he's an adult, but it's his son, whose responsibility is to mentor this young man into adulthood, to teach him the ways of the world and of God, and to bring him up right, and to be a good member of society, good citizen, right? And he's teaching him how to build a bomb and how to use it to rob a bank. And it, oh, it's just shocking, really shocking to think about that. But he was, in an extreme different way. Here we have Luke mentoring Theophilus for good, for the gospel, right? And making sure that he is safe eternally. And then we have this bank robber teaching his son how to build a bomb to rob a bank. And we have Herod teaching his children and grandchildren that, well, it's okay, just murder whoever you want so that you can keep your power, your authority over this kingdom, right? That you can remain king of Judea by killing all these baby boys. And that was his legacy that he left for his children and grandchildren. So I know that it's a stark contrast, but we're going to see that throughout Luke's gospel. And I hope to remember to always point that out to you. But Luke does that a lot. He will show you a good example and a bad example, or a bad example and then a good example. And he does that throughout his gospel. There's always this stark contrast. And I think right here, it's pretty, maybe it's pretty hidden, but it is there. Theophilus was mentored by Luke, and Herod is mentoring his children in a very different way. But just they're one verse apart, right? We have Theophilus, and then we have Herod. But Luke's very good at that, as is the Lord, right? Luke gets his material from the life of the Lord, so we will see that carried out in more pages here in Luke. So that is a good place that we can stop today's lesson. A couple reminders. First of all, if you don't have a Bible dictionary, please get one. I really recommend this one by Tenney. Again, that's Tenney. If you want, you can go online. I'm sure you'll find a used one somewhere. It's been in print, I think, since about 1987. So you can get a used copy of it. So if you're not yet convinced that you need a Bible dictionary, you can go and watch the video that I made earlier today specifically on that. It's in the series How to Study the Bible, and it's titled Using a Bible Dictionary. So I'll leave you with that, and hope that this has been a blessing for you. Please do consider the messages that you're giving to those around you, especially the young people. And I will see you back here tomorrow. In the meantime, have a blessed day, and thank you for being here. Goodbye.